Welcome to Mock News. That's Miller and Stock News. Breaking news today. Stock and Miller are awesome. And these are the awesome things that we've been doing.
That's right. Thank you so much. Well, we are excited to be here today going over Flippy Flappies. And as a matter of fact, our weather does tell us that it is cloudy with a chance of Flippy Flappy for the foreseeable future. Aren't you excited? Make sure you bring those raincoats and umbrellas to school. Oh wait, don't. They have hoods and they're also weapons. Never mind. And then, in sports news, there's a warning issued. 20 cases of Foldy-related thumb injuries have been reported, and doctors are urging that you stretch before class. We don't want to see any of those injuries occurring for the remainder of this Flippy Flappy season. So, Miller, what do we got? What do we got going on here?
All right, well, we wanted to catch everyone up on where we are with our Flippy Flappy Foldies, as things have been crazy lately. So, if you are needing some guidance on them, this is what we have done thus far in the Flippy Flappy Foldies. Now, we have started discussing the Cold War and how the Cold War lasted from 1947 to 1991. Yes, 1991. That is relatively recently. In our first flap here, we discussed what the Cold War was, our definitions here, that the Cold War was a period of political and military tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, characterized by this threat of nuclear warfare.
Yes.
Always concerned that we would all die.
Everyone did.
At any point. All right, and that this is the entire idea of the Cold War and the United States' position in the Cold War was containment, wanting to keep communism from spreading any further than it had already spread it, because communism is very bad.
It is, especially to Americans. We don't like it one bit, which brings us to that second flap where we are trying to make sure that democracy is widely accepted. So with the Marshall Plan, our democratic nation is giving aid to other countries. You should have the chart where it shows how much money and supply we have given out. That's going to make people say, oh my, they're not so bad. And maybe democracy isn't so bad either. Then you have the Truman Doctrine, which is also a promise, and that is a promise to contain communism on paper. And then at the bottom of that flap, you should have your divided Germany map with your how is it divided flap inception going on there. And then why was Germany divided? Miss Miller's class should have a snake drawn in there, chopped to bits. Because if you are chopped to bits, you can't attack people.
You can't start a third world war. All right, then we talked about the importance of the Berlin airlift and how once Germany was divided, like we see in this flap, the Soviet Union controlled East Germany and East Berlin, while democracy, the great nations really, if you will, controlled West Germany and West Berlin, and they didn't like that. You know, East Berliners were escaping over to West Berlin, and therefore the Soviet Union cut it off so that people could no longer escape over into democracy, and so that's where the Berlin airlift came in, and that is what these fill-in-the-blank notes were. Now, below that is a bit of flapception, and that you had some fill in the blank, some sentence starters here to complete about the Berlin airlift and why it was so important, why it mattered, with the candy bomber and such. And then we had a very marvelous day on Valentine's Day. It was so romantic. It was beautiful. Discussing the differences between the NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, the alliance between the United States and other democratic countries, and then the Warsaw Pact, which was the Soviet response to NATO. So that's what you see in a Venn diagram just below your Berlin airlift fill in the blanks.
That's right. Join me on a journey to flap number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, if you need to go back and count them. The causes of the Korean War. This is going to be our first real example of a proxy war, and this is going to be our first example where we see what life is like in a communist nation versus a capitalist nation. So you have your causes of the Korean War listed here. You have life in North Korea and life in South Korea listed on the other side. And at the bottom, you're going to have that map that shows the 4 stages of the war. It was split evenly after World War II. the communist nation invades, but we have to stick to the Truman Doctrine that promised to contain. So we invade again or attack back, counterattack, that's what I was from the lower portion there, and also at the Incheon landings, we invade successfully and push them all the way back up to near China. Now China, not a fan of democracy getting that close to them, so they invade, which was kind of a surprise, and we ended back where we started. Now we talked about the pros and the cons of this war as well. And while this was not a clear victory in that we did not spread democracy, it is a victory in that we did what we set out to do, and we contained communism successfully. It also allowed 50 million South Koreans to live a free life and outside of the control of a communist dictator, which nobody likes.
No, not at all. Thank you very much, Ms. Stock. Now moving on to the Red Scare and McCarthyism. The Red Scare, you might feel like we've already talked about that because, well, we have. There was a Red Scare after World War I, and now we've got a second Red Scare happening after World War II here in the Cold War. Kind of a synonym for the Red Scare at this time was McCarthyism. Senator McCarthy led the haul against communists within the U.S. government and other areas during this time. So that is what these notes up here were. You divided your Flippy, Flappy, Foldy into 6 boxes up here, and you did a bit of research on these 6 different Red Scare topics and explained how the government was really getting involved in trying to shut down communism within the United States for fear that that was going to spread. Right, as we finished that, we moved down to the bottom part of this flap, which was life during the Cold War. Now, the 2 major things we talked about, first of all, facing the bomb. We looked at some key facts about what life was like for Americans during the Cold War, facing this fear of the fact that at any point the Soviet Union could drop nuclear bombs on us and destroy our entire civilization. So there was a bit of fear. We watched the good old duck and cover video and learned how to respond in a nuclear situation.
That's right.
In case you aren't completely disintegrated immediately. And then we answered the question, how did fears of nuclear war affect American society? Then on the other side, we started looking at pop culture. We had Elvis in the building, and we looked at what some of the major differences were of the 1950s from previous cultures. The major change being cars and the impact of cars on American society. People are starting to eat fast food in cars. People are listening to this new rock and roll music in their cars. People are going to drive-ins in their cars. Really, our entire culture centered around cars and the impact that that was having on this new baby boom generation.
That's right. That's going to lead us to the next flap, which is flap number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The top of that 6th flap should be your Eisenhower road here. It is the road from Truman to Eisenhower. So what we were discussing here are some of Truman's policies from his presidency. We're leaving those behind. So you had to look at the fair deal and list us out some information about what those policies were. Some of the things your textbook mentioned were raising minimum wage and increasing benefits from Social Security. So some of those things. We're leaving that behind. We're traveling past this billboard because we're starting to like Ike. Don't ask me why Ike is short for Eisenhower, because I don't know. But that is his nickname, and I Like Ike is one of his slogans. So now we're moving to Eisenhower's dynamic conservatism, where you are listing out some details about what he was hoping to accomplish. And then down here, just the importance of interstates. As that car culture progresses and people are eating in their cars and being entertained in their cars and listening to radio in their cars and getting makey outy in their cars if you're a teenager.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. We are needing more roads because you don't want to have one of these sweet, awesome, fun cars and have no place to drive it. So we're trying to connect the country, get mobility. It allows the military to travel as well, because remember, this whole time there's this fear of communism and attack. So it's a way to unify the country. And then at the bottom, we will get to this today if you're in my class, because we didn't yet. And it is all of Eisenhower's foreign policies here, and all of his policies. So we'll be going over that. That will be at the bottom. And then the last flap that you should have something in.
Last flap is talking about the affluent society. Now, you might be wondering what affluent means. What it means is you drink your tea with your pinky up. All right, affluent are the higher end society. All right. So what was going on for these folks during the Cold War? And you look at 4 major areas. First, you're going to look at suburbs, American abundance. What was housing like? How were people physically living during the Cold War? On the back of that, we have television. What is the new impact of this television on American society, to include Hollywood and their impact? Then music. How was music changing? What was this newfangled rock and roll? And why was it so dangerous to this precious American society? And then finally, new technology. We have electronics, we have aviation, new medical technology. And so how is our country really just improving in these areas? Now note, when you cut these out to put them in your Flippy, Flappy, Foldy, you must be aware that they are two-sided. Therefore, you can't just cut out the guitar. Make sure you leave room for the sciencey things that I don't know what they're called on the back.
Beakers.
All right, same with the house and the TV. Then you'll staple the sides of them, so we have a little bit of flapception there.
It's very nice. I went for a one-sided approach. If you're in my class, just cut out the squares and not your neighbor's hair. So to go back through this, flap number 1 are those definitions. Flap number 2 is Marshall Plan, Truman Doctrine, divided Germany. Flap number 3 is going to be the Berlin airlift, the candy bomber, and then NATO versus Warsaw. Flap number 4 is going to be the Korean War. Flap number 5 is going to be Red Scare McCarthyism, and then facing the bomb. And then flap number 6 is going to be Eisenhower's policy and his interstates. And flap number 7 is going to be those fancy schmancy rich people and what they like to do. So that is where you should be. Feel free to watch this video as often as you'd like until your Flippy Flappy is Flippy Flappy and amazing.
Yes. Thank you for joining us today on this episode of Mock News. We look forward to coming to you again to finish out our Flippy Flappy Foldies.
That's right. See you later, kids.